Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Gail Lee. I'm the president and board of Aging Advantage. We're a nonprofit here in the St. Louis area that is committed to care for all. We try to help our elderly in the community with all kinds of things, and especially too, we have a very strong caregiver support program, and through some funding with the St. Louis Area Agency on Aging, we're do these caregiver talks and other talks to just try to help people in the community. And with a great pleasure today of having Hedva Levy talk to us. She's a pharmacist that specializes in the elderly and all the things that are happening. And I've had the pleasure of knowing her for many, many, many years. And I hadn't heard her talk for the last few years, but now this year I'm hearing plenty of talks, and it's really it's just really rewarding because I think the information she shared over the years has been very helpful. And she has a really, really good newsletter that comes out once a month. And earlier this month, I read it and I said, "Hey, can you join us in a talk?" And she was like, "Already? You know that fast?" And I was like, "Well, just this newsletter just has such good content about the holidays coming up and how medicine and even alcohol can fit in." And we did a talk on Tuesday that was about the holiday blues. And even that speaker was saying that sometimes our elderly that are so sad or just not even realizing what's happening with the holidays can start to have some drinks and not even realize how that's affecting them because it's all affecting differently. Plus, they might have had medicines. He didn't talk about the medicine part. So I thought, what a good, segue into what you're going to talk about. So
Yep.
Take it away, Hedva.
Great, Gail. Thanks for that introduction. Yeah, it's an interesting topic that I think we need to talk about, especially this time of year when family gatherings are happening and there's more occasions perhaps than usual where to have a toast and have a drink together kind of thing. And medications and alcohol don't always go well together, and things are certainly more of a concern as we get older. So that's what I'm going to kind of highlight some of the issues to be aware of regarding alcohol. I want to start off by saying that when you're together with your family members, your older adult parents, perhaps your parents, shall I say, it's a good time to observe in general how they're doing. Maybe you can take a peek at how their medications are being managed. I don't know depending on how involved you are with their day-to-day care, just to see how mom and dad are doing. And certainly with the alcohol, there can be signs you might look for of to maybe detect if mom or dad are drinking more than you were aware of in the past. Sometimes that their alcohol use is very common. As we get older, certainly if an individual is drinking throughout their lifetime, they're going to continue drinking as they get older, but the alcohol can have different effects, which I'm going to go into in just a second. So it's a good chance to just take a look at mom or dad and see how he or she is doing. Statistic wise, just to kind of give you a sense of how prevalent drinking is or is not. There's data on binge drinking. So that's going to be having multiple drinks at one time. The numbers are somewhere, I'm going to just say ballpark of 10 to 20%, maybe even 20 to 25%, depending on what age group you ask, are reported to have had binge drinking in the past 30 days or past year. There's different studies that are out there. But when we're looking at that age 65 and older population, the number says about 11% have reported binge drinking in the last 30 days. If you extend there's another survey that I think had younger people involved, maybe age 50 and up, found that 27% of that adult group sampled said they did some binge drinking in the past year. So that's multiple drinks at one time, right? But even nightly glass of wine or hard liquor can be impactful for older adults, especially when they're taking medications that matter. So that's where my newsletter kind of focused on those medicines we need to worry about. And that's what I wanted to share with you today a little bit.
And it seems like on some of it, people might have, as they're growing up or aging, they would have maybe gone to parties or different things maybe more regularly. Then all of a sudden they're drinking per se even less, but all of a sudden it's the holidays and there's all this stuff going on. And so their tolerance isn't where it was before
Right.
because they just haven't been doing that. And plus then the medication is affecting.
Yeah, and also, so right, there might be there might be that they're not drinking as regularly, right? So there's this occasion now there's more drinking, but remember in that interim since the last time there was an opportunity to drink socially or whatever, maybe the health has changed a little bit, maybe the nutritional intake has changed a little bit, and I don't want to forget to talk about the hydration status. Dehydration can make the impact of alcohol intake worse, even for younger people, but certainly as we get older, it's much more common to be dehydrated, not overtly noticing that you're dehydrated, but we just don't tend to drink enough as we get older. Or those thirst receptors, those sensations that tell us we need to drink aren't as strong as we get older. So all those things can change, right? So yeah, so you come around
Plus
after.
Some of them don't want to drink because they don't want to have to go to the bathroom.
Right.
Yeah,
Urination, right?
Some of your medicine you're going to talk about, I'm sure.
Yep. So then you have that cycle. If you have that urinary incontinence or the frequency, the urgency, so that absolutely will compound it. And then, so then it comes time to a family gathering and the wine comes out, maybe different alcohol, hard liquor or whatever. And the effects can be even more dangerous, right? So those are all things to consider. The unique situation that holiday brings together, and maybe just even the excitement and planning for the holidays. You might, the parent may not have been eating and drinking per usual, right? Making them again more dehydrated and maybe not nutritionally as sound or whatever. Maybe they've lost a little weight or something leading up to the holidays. Anything's possible, but to think about that big picture of how mom or dad is doing. So what do we worry about with alcohol? And I don't think people appreciate this enough, but just age can lead to handling alcohol differently. And if you've heard me talk before, Gail, I know when I speak about medication use as we get older, we handle medications differently. And the same things go for alcohol, but there's even different things happening. So as we get older, we have more, our relative composition of fat to lean muscle mass shifts. We have more fat percentage and less lean muscle mass as we get older. And that's just something that happens with aging. So because of that shift, the alcohol distributes differently in the body. And I don't want to get too much into physiology and chemistry, but essentially the alcohol cannot be taken up in different parts of our body as much because of this fat muscle shift. And dehydration is going to compound that even more. So think of it this way. There's more, the alcohol is more concentrated in the body. So a little bit of alcohol is going to go a lot further, if you will, in an older adult just because of the physiology of our bodies. So that's one thing that makes us more sensitive to the effects of alcohol. So a little glass of wine or a shot of whiskey, whatever the person might have been drinking throughout their lifetime, that same amount will have more impact. That alcohol is going to have more of a noticeable effect. The other thing that goes on is our liver does not clear out alcohol as quickly as we get older than when we were younger. So we are not transforming and getting the alcohol out of the body. So it can't distribute as vastly throughout our body. So making it more concentrated.
Right.
And what's there, we can't get rid of it as fast through our liver. So that alcohol, I don't know how else to say it, but a little bit of alcohol goes a lot longer and farther, if you will, as we get older than when we're younger. So it's important to be aware that, if a couple glasses of wine were okay for mom or dad years back, one glass of wine might absolutely, put them under the table or they might react differently.
Yeah.
So our bodies change. The next piece is what do the medications do? And alcohol and medications don't always mix. And that was the point of when I put that article in the newsletter, because people are commonly combining medications that can be really serious. So of course, I want to, how do I got to talk about the specific medications, but think about medications that the way they work in our body, they get into the brain. So things that affect our depression, anxiety, seizure medications, these are all higher risk medicines that are higher risk of interacting with alcohol and leading to more drowsiness, more difficulty walking, more maybe speech, the slurring of the speech. All
Mhm.
those effects are going to be more prevalent when someone combines alcohol when they're taking these medications. So the antidepressants, the anti-anxiety medications, if someone is taking a medication to help them sleep, typically those hypnotic medicines, those sleep medications are definitely going to interact with that alcohol, and you're going to have more of an effect of that alcohol more quickly. We also want to think about opioid pain medications, right? So the Vicodin or Norco or even
Mhm.
OxyContin. So those more potent pain medications, again, have those centrally acting mechanisms so that combining these medications with alcohol, you're going to see the effects of alcohol more quickly. And I worry mostly about falls, those accidental injuries. Certainly driving risks are going to be the difficulty, more slower reaction time, and that sedation and car accidents have been associated with alcohol combining with these medications. Another one I want to highlight, because we may not think about it as a medicine that can affect us centrally, that interact with alcohol. Gabapentin is medication we use for nerve pain. Pregabalin is another one. The brand name of that one is Lyrica, and that you might see the brand name more often of Lyrica. But gabapentin and pregabalin or Lyrica, these are medicines that first and foremost are seizure medicines, but we use them also for nerve pain and as we get older. And those can interact with alcohol. And again, we worry about the fall risk, the dizziness, the gait instability, being, the not being as sure-footed. And muscle relaxants is another one, right? So I'm trying to Flexeril and methocarbamol. There's certain medications that are muscle relaxants. So think about what mom or dad might be taking that, or your care person, that for pain, for mood, for things. So that kind of group of medications, certainly antipsychotics. So something like Seroquel or Risperdal or Zyprexa. These are antipsychotic medications. Maybe someone's taking it for schizophrenia, for it would be one reason. Also for behavioral issues, if they have dementia, those antipsychotics might be prescribed for those reasons too. So there's a greater sensitivity to those CNS, central nervous system side effects, and just to be aware, right, that a little bit of alcohol is gonna go farther. So that was the main gist. Oh, and then the other thing I wanted to talk about alcohol. So those are the medications we worry about. The other thing people maybe don't recognize is the impact of alcohol on health conditions. So it's important just to talk about how alcohol can negatively impact some health conditions. Diabetes is first on the list, and this always comes up when I've done support groups and presented about alcohol in past different opportunities where I've given these kinds of talks. Alcohol can lead to low blood sugar. And that some people see that as a little opposite. But if someone has diabetes and you're adding alcohol, you need to make sure we're checking blood sugars and making sure that hypoglycemia, that low blood sugar, is not going to be a problem. Certainly high blood pressure, long-term alcohol use can affect blood pressure. It can affect other heart conditions. We worry about liver problems if someone has chronic high use of alcohol. And certainly frequent use of alcohol can affect the memory, and depression and anxiety too. So those mood disorders. So it's important to get a sense of how frequently or how much someone might be using alcohol throughout the year. But just wanted to highlight, going back to the medication interactions this time of year specifically. Another concern interaction with medications, going beyond what I talked about in the newsletter, stomach irritation. So if a person takes aspirin or an anticoagulant, which would be a blood thinner, we use those medicines for people with atrial fibrillation, that fast heart rhythm, or if they've had a blood clot and maybe they're taking an anticoagulant to prevent or to treat a blood clot, that can increase the risk of bleeding. And alcohol mixed with a medicine that increases the bleeding risk increases that stomach irritation and stomach bleeding. So we have the anticoagulants, aspirin, other antiplatelet agents, so something like Plavix, could increase the bleeding risk. And of course, those non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, those are the pain medicines you can take without a prescription, like ibuprofen and naproxen. So we worry about increased stomach irritation with alcohol. And that can happen just when we're having alcohol, just a glass or two at the holidays, not on a regular basis even, that stomach irritation can happen. So that's most of the information I wanted to present about the alcohol issue. If you have any other thoughts, Gail, that's something we should be helpful to talk about.
Well, I just had a thought when you were talking about like the Zyprexa, some of those things for those more serious disorders, but a lot of, and we've had this talk before in years past, but it can be a trend, but people go in the hospital, maybe they're having some delirium and they get stuck on this medicine and they didn't really have a lot of psych history before. And all of a sudden they're on these kind of heavy duty psych meds. And then when you were talking about how the other things, how the alcohol and everything impacts, but we've been talking a little bit in previous talks on just really watching those medications as you're coming out of the hospital. And there's just like a lot of things going on. So if we're visiting our parents, or the people during the holidays, just really noting, like you're talking about what's going on with them. If you look at it and you're like, wait, what's all this stuff? And it really has an effect.
It's a good point, right? So medication creep, I think anytime after hospitalization, the risk of someone coming home, the chance of someone coming home with more medications than they came in with, went into the hospital, is certainly high. And the family members may not realize all the medicines that mom or dad is taking. The other piece, even if so the hospital is certainly a concern. I love that example. But even over time, maybe medications have been added, and are they still necessary? So that goes back to my whole theme and having put the book together. Maybe it's your medications, because we tend to keep adding medications and not stopping to look at what is still needed. And is it helping as much as is that any benefit we're getting greater than the possible side effects, those harms? And some medications, as we get older, they're not, the benefits are more minimal, or relatively minimal. And so we have to think about, is it worth having that extra pill? The cost of the medication is added to the cost of the side effects, added to the cost of just having to manage one more medicine. So looking at the medication list this time of year, if you don't see your family member that often, it's a good time just to check in on what all are you taking? What's on this list, mom or dad? And always ask about dietary supplements as well as over the counter. So those two categories of non-prescription medications are just as important.
And often the doctors really aren't looking, or people aren't telling the doctors that they're really taking those things, or the accurate dosage.
Right. That's interesting. So, right. We don't think about them as medications. They're not prescribed. So of course they're natural. It doesn't count, but it counts, right? And how much is someone really taking? So, it's important to look at everything. And I am trying to, there's certainly some of the dietary supplements have side effects that also affect cognition and drowsiness, sedation, things like that. Those types of dietary supplements will certainly interact with that effect of alcohol. So going back to that idea, it's a nice reminder of why we need to think about the dietary supplements as well as the prescription medicines, and OTCs as well.
And something that we've talked about as care managers quite a bit, on occasion, is that it's kind of a little bit of the opposite of what things that you've been talking about. And is that people, when they go to their doctor, they might be heavily drinking, going to that person that has been continuing to drink regularly. Well, the doctors a lot of times people don't tend to ask the older person. They feel like they don't do drugs and alcohol because they're old. And the same comes up about sex. They don't ask about sex, drugs, or alcohol, because it's like they're old. Nobody cares about that stuff anymore. They're not doing it.
Or it's a little awkward too, right? But absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those assumptions. So the point here being, you need to bring it up. And anytime with any medication, there's 8 essential things you need to know. One of those being important interactions, and that includes food interactions and alcohol interactions. And I tell people, and I think about this always, for me, when I see a doctor, and I will typically be often be asked at a regular checkup, how much alcohol or do you drink alcohol, right? And it's important to be honest about it. It's certainly, we factor it in. It doesn't mean there's no good or bad. It's just we need to know. We need to know how your liver might be affected by it, how other medications might be affected by it, so that we can use medication safely. And, it's a tough, there's a fine line there. There's certain times we might say absolutely no alcohol because of these medications. But more often than not, it might be a matter of just a little bit if the person is able to limit their alcohol. And if they're not driving, I mean, you have to think about all those,
Things.
situations, right? Is there risky behavior, or are we staying at home and just going to be with family tonight and not going anywhere? So I think everything has to be personalized to what matters most to the individual, and to be aware that if there's an interaction with a medication that could be serious, just to be well aware of that and decide that we're either going to avoid alcohol altogether, or just have a very small amount of wine or schnapps or a little touch of something. But that's it. So we're going to stay safe and not risk the fall or something more serious.
Yeah, those fall risks are a big thing.
You're right. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but by golly, right? That extra drowsiness, being a little confused, we can avoid, and it's preventable. That's the tough thing. It's preventable, right? So having the information up front, which is why I appreciate you wanted to cover this topic, and it does matter. And we need to talk about it, and why not this time of year, right?
Yeah, I know when I reached out, you were like, prepare a class this fast. And I was just like, no, just what you talked about in your newsletter, because, it's the time of year to really be looking at that when we're gathering together and seeing these, new things. But you have a lot of upcoming programs too in the community that people can take advantage of.
Yeah, I'm excited to share for sure. We've got one at Oasis in St. Louis on the books in January. I'm going to be talking about, it'll be three sessions, 3 Wednesdays in January I'll be talking about medications in older adults, why medications are a bigger problem in older adults, why we need to be aware of these concerns. I'll talk about the high-risk medications and some of the problems that we run into that they get in the way of managing our medications effectively as we get older, or easily. And then I'll talk about ways to advocate for safer medication use and tips, strategies. So that'll be a great course in January through Oasis. So people need to go to the Oasis St. Louis website to register for that. And I also will be doing something at the Mirowitz Center in probably the spring, and that'll be open to the public as well. Probably a monthly couple sessions going on every month there, talking about similar types of topics, but different places to catch me and take advantage of learning and thinking and exploring new ways to look at the medications we take.
Yeah. So one thing we'll do is in the on the post on Facebook, we can put in the comments, I think, your contact information if someone wanted to subscribe to your newsletter.
That's what I was going to ask. That would be great.
That comes out usually every month, I think.
It's monthly. Yep. It's monthly. I'm getting the December one together now.
Yeah. And it has really, really good information every month. And it kind of tells also where you're going to be and what classes and how they can get more information. And then I think maybe we'll post a picture or a comment about your book. You just recently wrote a book, and it just is, it's very informative. And if they can't make it out to some classes, then they might be able to get some information that way. That'd be great.
I'd appreciate that. I think so. I think it'd be fantastic. Just resources and tools to put out there for anyone interested. I want to say anyone who takes medications, and we're all aging. We're all going to be dealing with this kind of stuff as we get older. ideally we want to prevent health problems. So, stay healthy, age in a healthy manner. And so much of the information you're sharing with your group is towards that. So the book is
So,
another tool.
so when you go to the doctor and they don't ask you about alcohol anymore, you'll know you're old.
Right. It's just like when you're not carded anymore. But bring it up, right? New medication comes on board. Does this interact with alcohol? I have a glass of wine here. I enjoy a drink there, and find out. So know in advance of how the medications, how you can take them most safely, shall we say.
Yeah. And we didn't even touch on this. It's really another whole topic in and of itself. But I think that, I've noticed that sometimes people that maybe didn't really have a problem before, or they were fairly maybe borderline, but as all of a sudden they have dementia or some issues there, they're not really remembering that they had how many drinks that they've had. And so all of a sudden they've drank a whole bottle of whatever. And that causes a lot of problems.
So many situations that can come up. And it's an important thing that you mentioned. I appreciate that, Gail. But that comes into just safe environment for someone with dementia, and trying to set everyone up for success to eliminate those kinds of risks. But yeah, family members and caregivers, it's hard, but there's so much they can do to help mom or dad age as independently and safely as possible.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking the time today. This was like a quick overview, but that's all we needed to really get this topic out there.
Get people thinking about it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. So we're gonna kind of end our live stream here, and feel free to contact Hedva or us about any issues you might be having.